John Thompson had always lived a quiet life in the city. He worked at a small office, handled numbers all day, and returned to his tiny apartment in the evenings. Life was comfortable, but it felt empty. He often looked out of his window at the skyline and wondered what lay beyond the city, beyond the crowded streets, beyond the walls of glass and concrete. He longed for something real, something raw and alive. One evening, as he sat at his desk, he made a decision that would change his life forever. He would leave the city and venture into the wilderness. He spent the next few weeks preparing. He read books about forests, rivers, and the animals that lived in the wild. He bought supplies carefully: some basic clothes, a sturdy backpack, a tent, and a small cooking set. He wanted to be ready, but deep down, he knew that the forest had its own rules, and no amount of preparation could teach him everything. Finally, one bright morning, he boarded a bus that would take him to the edge of the frontier, a place few people dared to visit. The bus ride was long. John watched the city disappear behind him, and the roads grow narrower and wilder. Trees became taller, rivers wider, and the air fresher. He felt a thrill in his chest, a mixture of fear and excitement. When he finally stepped off the bus at a small dirt path leading into the forest, he felt as if he had stepped into another world. The air smelled of pine and wet earth. Birds sang in the distance. Sunlight filtered through the branches, making patterns on the ground. John started walking, following a narrow trail that twisted through the forest. Every step was a new discovery. He saw deer grazing quietly near the trees, rabbits hopping across his path, and the occasional fox disappearing into the underbrush. The forest was alive in ways he had never experienced in the city. The silence was not empty; it was full of whispers, rustles, and the steady heartbeat of nature. As the day passed, John walked deeper into the wilderness. He felt both exhilarated and tired. The terrain was rough, and he had to climb over rocks, wade through streams, and push aside thick branches. By late afternoon, he realized he needed to find a place to rest. He wanted somewhere safe, but also somewhere quiet and private. After exploring a bit, he found a small clearing. It was perfect. A gentle slope led down to a stream, and the sun shone through a break in the trees. The spot was peaceful, untouched, and inviting. John decided to set up camp there for the night. He took out his small tent, spread it on the soft grass, and unpacked his supplies. He boiled some water for tea and ate a simple meal of bread and dried fruit. As he sat by the stream, listening to the water flow, he felt a calm he had never known. The city and its worries seemed far away. Here, he was just another creature in the forest, part of the rhythm of life around him. As evening approached, John felt a strange mixture of freedom and vulnerability. He was alone, far from anyone who could help him if something went wrong. The thought both excited and worried him. He had always been careful, but the wilderness had its own dangers. Still, he felt alive in a way he never had before. When the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, John made a decision. He wanted to feel completely free, to shed the barriers of city life, and to experience the forest in its purest form. Slowly, he took off his clothes. He looked at the sky, the trees, and the stream. The air was cool but refreshing. He lay down on the grass, letting it touch his skin, feeling the breeze against his body. He felt vulnerable, but he also felt a deep connection to the world around him. For a moment, the worries of life, the rules of society, and the pressures of daily living all disappeared. There was only him and the forest. The stars began to appear one by one as night fell, and John felt a sense of peace he had never imagined possible. Sleep came quickly. The sounds of the forest, the rustling leaves, the distant call of an owl, the gentle flow of the stream, lulled him into a deep, dreamless rest. He slept as he had never slept before, without fear, without worry, without barriers. The night passed quietly, and the forest watched over him, silent and steady. Before dawn, a strange sound stirred him. It was faint at first, a rustle that seemed too deliberate to be the wind. John opened his eyes slowly. The forest looked different in the early light, softer but alive. Then he saw her standing at the edge of the clearing. A young girl, with sharp eyes and untamed hair, was watching him carefully. Her clothes were simple, patched from years of living in the wild, and she moved with the confidence of someone who belonged to the forest. John froze. He had expected animals, maybe birds, but not a human. The girl stepped closer, examining him with curiosity rather than fear. Her eyes held a mixture of surprise and amusement, as if she had never seen someone quite like him before. She tilted her head, studying him, and John realized with a jolt that he was completely exposed, entirely vulnerable. His heart raced, but he did not move. The girl's lips curved into a small smile, and she made no sound. John felt both embarrassed and fascinated. He had never met anyone who lived so fully in the wild, who seemed so comfortable with the forest and its ways. There was no malice in her gaze, only curiosity and the quiet authority of someone who knew the land better than anyone else could. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then, slowly, the girl turned and gestured toward a nearby path. John understood, somehow, that she was inviting him to follow. Though he had never seen her before, John felt a strange sense of trust. He got up, feeling awkward but also exhilarated. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath as they moved together. The girl led him through trees and over roots, pointing out small details: a patch of edible berries, a hidden stream, a place where the ground was soft enough to rest. John listened carefully, learning from her every step. She did not speak much, but her actions spoke volumes. By the time the sun fully rose, John realized he was no longer just a visitor in the forest. He was being shown a world he had only dreamed of, a world that was raw, beautiful, and full of life. The first morning, which had begun with him sleeping alone under the stars, had turned into the beginning of an encounter that would change his life forever. The girl, wild, fearless, and unafraid, had claimed him. Not in ownership, but in a way that would teach him how to live, how to survive, and how to truly be part of the wilderness. John did not know it yet, but this morning was the start of a journey that would test his courage, challenge his limits, and open his heart in ways he had never imagined. The forest, the girl, and the freedom he had sought were all waiting for him, and he was ready to embrace it. John followed the girl quietly as she led him deeper into the forest. Her movements were swift and graceful, as if the trees and the earth themselves guided her. John had never seen anyone move like that. Every step she took seemed natural, effortless, and perfectly in tune with the wilderness around her. He struggled to keep up, his legs aching from the long hike the previous day. But he refused to slow down. There was something about her, something magnetic, that made him want to learn from her, to follow her wherever she went. After a short walk, the girl stopped beside a large oak tree and pointed to a small clearing nearby. The grass was soft, and sunlight streamed through the branches, making patterns on the ground. She gestured for John to sit. He hesitated for a moment, still feeling self-conscious from their first encounter. But then he lowered himself carefully onto the grass. The girl sat opposite him, her eyes scanning the forest around them as if she were listening to secrets only she could hear. "You need to learn quickly," she finally said, her voice low but firm. "The forest is beautiful, yes, but it is not safe for those who do not know it." Her words surprised John. There was no judgment, only a warning and a hint of care. He nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He realized that surviving in this place would not be easy. It would demand patience, attention, and courage. The girl began showing him simple things first. She picked up a small branch and pointed to a line of tiny tracks in the soil. "Animals leave signs," she explained. "You must see them, follow them, understand them. The forest talks if you know how to listen." John leaned closer, trying to read the tracks. He had never paid so much attention to anything before. Every leaf, every stone, every broken twig suddenly seemed important. He realized how much he had taken for granted in his city life. where signs and details were often hidden behind walls and screens. As the morning passed, the girl led him to a small stream. The water was clear and cold, rushing over rocks with a soft, continuous sound. She showed him how to find safe water to drink. John bent down and tasted it. It was fresh and clean, and he felt a rush of relief. "The forest provides," she said, smiling slightly, "but only for those who respect it." Her words carried a lesson, one that John felt deep in his heart. The wilderness was not just a place to live, it was a place to understand and honor. The girl then led him to a patch of berries. She picked a few and handed them to John. "Some are safe, some are not," she explained. "You must know the difference." John nodded, tasting the berries carefully. Sweet and tart, they were unlike anything he had ever eaten in the city. He realized that life in the forest was not just about survival, it was about noticing details, being careful, and appreciating the small gifts the land offered. As the day went on, John began to trust the girl more. She did not speak much, but she did not need to. Her actions were enough to teach him. She showed him how to start a fire using dry leaves and stones, how to make a small shelter from branches, and how to move quietly through the forest without disturbing the animals. John listened, observed, and tried to imitate her movements. He stumbled many times, dropping branches, spilling water, and tripping over roots. But she never scolded him. She only watched, corrected him gently, and demonstrated again. By afternoon, John felt exhausted but proud. He had built a small lean-to and started a fire that burned steadily. The girl nodded in approval. And for the first time, John felt a spark of confidence. He realized that he was capable of more than he had ever believed. The wilderness was hard, yes, but it was also rewarding. Every small success brought a sense of accomplishment that no office job or city street could ever give him. During a quiet moment by the fire, John asked the girl a question he had been curious about. "How did you learn all this?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke softly. "I learned because I had no choice. I had to survive. My family, they were gone. I had to rely on the forest, and the forest became my teacher." John felt a pang of sadness for her. He realized that behind her strength and confidence was a life of hardship and resilience. She had faced challenges that he could hardly imagine, and yet she had thrived. As the sun began to set, the girl showed John how to prepare for the night. She taught him how to gather firewood carefully, making sure not to damage the plants around them. She showed him how to place the fire safely and how to arrange his shelter to stay warm. John followed her instructions carefully. The forest was beautiful at dusk, with the sunlight turning the leaves golden and the shadows stretching long. He felt a sense of peace mixed with awe. Night came slowly. The sounds of the forest changed. Crickets chirped, an owl called in the distance, and the wind whispered through the trees. John lay in his small shelter, feeling a strange mixture of fear and comfort. The forest was alive, full of noises that he did not fully understand, but he also felt protected. The girl had taught him well. He realized that he could survive here, but only if he continued to pay attention, learn, and respect the land. That night, John thought about the girl. He had never met anyone like her before. She was wild, independent, and fearless, yet she carried wisdom and care in every action. She had claimed him in a way, not as a friend, not yet as a companion, but as someone she would guide. John felt a mixture of admiration, gratitude, and curiosity. Who was she? Really? How had she come to know the forest so well? He didn't ask these questions out loud, but they circled in his mind as he drifted into a light sleep. The next morning, the girl woke him early. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges. She gestured for him to follow again. John felt his body stiff from the previous day's work, but he rose quickly. The girl led him to a hidden path he had not noticed before. It wound through thick trees and over small hills. Along the way, she pointed out plants he could use for medicine. small traps she had set for catching food, and places where he could hide if danger came. John listened carefully, absorbing every detail. By midday, John realized how much he had learned in just one day with her. He could start a fire, find water, recognize edible plants, and move through the forest without making much noise. Yet, he also knew he had so much more to learn. The wilderness was vast, and the girl's knowledge seemed endless. He felt both humbled and inspired. She had survived here alone, and now she was showing him how to do the same. As they rested beside a small stream, the girl finally spoke more than a few words. "You will need patience," she said. "The forest tests you. It will challenge you, frustrate you, and sometimes frighten you. But if you learn, if you pay attention, it will give you life in return." John nodded, understanding her message. The forest was not just a place to escape, it was a place to grow, to discover strength he did not know he had. That evening, as they prepared for the second night, John felt a deep sense of connection to the forest and to the girl who had guided him. She had taken him under her wing, showing him the rules of the wilderness, the beauty of survival, and the importance of respect. He realized that this journey was changing him, shaping him into someone he had never been before. For the first time, John understood that the forest was not just a challenge to overcome, it was a teacher, a companion, and a place where he could discover the true meaning of life. And the girl, with her wild spirit and quiet strength, was the guide he had been waiting for. He did not know what the next days would bring, but he felt ready. The adventure, he realized, had only just begun. The next morning, John woke with the first light of the sun filtering through the trees. The previous days had taught him to rise early and use the daylight wisely. He stretched his arms and felt the stiffness of muscles he hadn't known existed. Every movement reminded him of the lessons he had learned so far. The careful steps, the bending, the lifting, the constant attention to his surroundings. Life in the forest was not easy, but it was alive in a way he had never experienced before. The girl, whose name John had finally learned was Eliza, was already awake. She had built a small fire and was checking the traps she had set the day before. She noticed John stirring and called out, "Come here, we need to start the day." John hurried to her side, eager to continue learning. Eliza handed him a small bundle of food berries, some roots, and a piece of dried meat. "Eat. You will need strength for the work ahead," she said. John nodded, grateful. He realized that every meal in the forest was a lesson in survival, a reminder that nothing should be wasted and everything had its purpose. After breakfast, Eliza decided it was time to teach John more difficult skills. She wanted him to learn how to move through the forest quietly, how to watch for signs of animals, and how to gather resources without leaving traces. She led him to a dense part of the forest where the sunlight barely touched the ground. The air was cool and smelled of earth and moss. John felt both nervous and excited. He knew that this part of the forest could be dangerous if he made mistakes, but he trusted Eliza's guidance. "Follow my lead," she whispered. "Watch your steps, and listen to the sounds around you." John nodded and followed closely. Every branch that snapped underfoot, every rustle of leaves, made him tense. But Eliza moved with complete confidence. She pointed out subtle signs, a broken twig, an indentation in the soil, a faint trail in the grass, and explained what they meant. John began to see the forest in a new way. It was full of hidden messages, stories written in the earth for those who knew how to read them. As the morning passed, John learned to identify animal tracks. He saw footprints of deer, foxes, and even a small bear. Eliza explained how each animal behaved, what they ate, and how to avoid danger. John listened carefully, trying to remember everything. He realized that living in the forest required constant attention, patience, and respect. He had once thought he could survive with simple tools and courage, but now he understood that knowledge was just as important as strength. Eliza then taught John how to use a small spear to catch fish from the stream. At first, John was clumsy, missing every attempt and nearly falling into the water. Eliza laughed softly, but she did not mock him. She showed him the correct way to hold the spear, how to move silently in the water, and how to anticipate the fish's movements. John practiced over and over, and finally, he managed to catch a small fish. Pride and relief surged through him. For the first time, he felt like he was truly becoming part of the forest, not just a visitor. By afternoon, they had gathered food and water, built a stronger shelter, and explored a part of the forest John had never seen before. The sun was high, and the forest was alive with birdsong and the rustle of small animals. John felt tired but satisfied. Every task had been a challenge, but every challenge had brought him a sense of achievement. Eliza watched him closely, noting his progress. She nodded occasionally, a silent acknowledgement that he was learning well. As they rested beside the stream, John looked at Eliza with curiosity. He had so many questions about her life and how she had become so skilled. "Eliza," he asked gently, "did you always live in the forest?" She paused, her eyes reflecting the sunlight. "No," she said. "I had a family, a home, but it all changed. I had to learn to survive alone. The forest became my teacher, my home, and my companion. You must understand, it is not easy, but it is real." John felt a deep respect for her. She had endured hardships he could hardly imagine, yet she carried herself with strength, grace, and quiet confidence. Evening arrived with a cool breeze and the soft sound of the stream flowing. Eliza showed John how to prepare for the night, arranging their fire and shelter carefully. She explained how to stay alert even while sleeping, how to protect themselves from the cold, and how to listen to the forest's rhythms. John followed her instructions closely, realizing how much he relied on her guidance. He also realized that this reliance was not weakness, it was trust, and it was part of learning to live in a world so different from the city he had left behind. That night, as they sat by the fire, Eliza began to tell stories about the forest. She spoke of the animals, the changes of seasons, and the lessons she had learned from hardship. John listened intently, fascinated by her knowledge and experience. He realized that the forest was alive not just in its plants and animals, but in its history, its secrets, and the lives of those who had survived within it. Every word she spoke painted a picture of a world he had never known. As the fire crackled and the stars appeared, John reflected on how much he had changed in just a few days. He was stronger, more aware, and more confident. The fear he had felt when he first entered the forest was now replaced by determination and curiosity. He understood that surviving in the wilderness required more than courage. It required patience, observation, and respect for life in all its forms. And he understood that Eliza was not just a guide. She was a teacher, a protector, and a living example of the strength the forest demanded. The next morning, John woke to the sound of birdsong and the gentle rustle of leaves. Eliza was already moving through the forest, checking the traps she had set. She gestured for John to follow, and together they walked in silence. He noticed details he had missed before: the smell of damp earth, the glint of water on leaves, the faint trails of animals moving through the underbrush. He realized that the forest was teaching him to see, to listen, and to feel in ways he had never experienced in the city. As the day progressed, John and Eliza encountered small challenges. A sudden rainstorm forced them to find shelter quickly. They huddled under a thick canopy of trees, using their knowledge to stay dry and safe. John felt the thrill of survival, the rush of working together to overcome obstacles. He realized that the forest demanded teamwork, even if only with the person guiding you. Eliza's calm and steady presence reassured him, and he began to understand the value of trust and cooperation. By afternoon, the storm had passed, leaving the forest sparkling and fresh. John and Eliza gathered food, checked their traps, and repaired their shelter. Every task required focus, patience, and skill. John could feel himself becoming stronger, more capable, and more attuned to the world around him. The forest was no longer intimidating, it was a place of discovery, learning, and connection. As the sun began to set, John sat beside the fire, reflecting on his journey so far. He realized that he had come to the forest seeking adventure, but he had found something deeper: knowledge, respect, and a connection to life itself. He looked at Eliza, who was preparing their meal with ease and precision, and felt gratitude and admiration. She had taken him under her wing, guiding him through challenges, teaching him lessons, and showing him the true meaning of survival. That night, as he lay in his shelter, John felt a sense of peace he had never known. He was no longer the same man who had entered the forest days ago. He was stronger, wiser, and more aware. The journey was far from over, but he was ready to face whatever came next. The forest had become a part of him, and Eliza had become more than a guide. She was a companion in the adventure of life itself. Days turned into weeks, and John felt himself changing more and more with each passing moment. The forest was no longer foreign. It had become a home. The wind, the rustling leaves, the flow of the streams, and the distant calls of animals. All of it felt familiar now. He moved with more confidence, his steps lighter, his senses sharper. Each morning, he woke with a new sense of purpose. He had begun to see the forest not just as a challenge to survive, but as a living world full of lessons and beauty. Eliza remained his guide, teacher, and constant companion. Their days were long and filled with hard work. But John no longer felt exhausted in the same way he had at the beginning. He had grown stronger, and even his body had adapted to the demands of wilderness life. He carried heavy bundles of wood, climbed steep hills, and walked long distances without complaint. He had begun to understand the rhythm of the forest, the way the animals moved, the changing patterns of the weather, and the subtle signs that could mean danger or opportunity. Eliza was always by his side, quietly watching, teaching, and encouraging. She had a way of moving through the forest that seemed almost magical. John often marveled at her skill. She could spot the smallest detail, a hidden path, a bird's nest, or the faintest trail of an animal. He tried to follow her lead, imitating her movements and learning from her observations. Sometimes, he would stumble, miss a clue, or fail at a task. But she never scolded him. Instead, she would smile softly, correct him, and demonstrate again. One afternoon, they came across a wide, fast-flowing river. The current was strong, and John hesitated. He had never faced such a dangerous obstacle alone. Eliza studied the river carefully, then looked at him. "We can cross, but we must be careful. Step slowly, hold the rocks, and watch your footing," she instructed. John nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. Together, they moved into the river, testing each step. Water splashed around their legs, and the current tugged at them, but they managed to cross safely. John felt a rush of pride. The forest was teaching him courage, patience, and careful planning. After the river, they continued through the woods, discovering new areas full of hidden wonders. John saw deer grazing in quiet meadows, rabbits darting across the paths, and birds building nests in tall trees. Eliza explained each animal's habits, their survival strategies, and how to respect their space. John listened attentively, realizing that living in the forest required understanding and balance. Every action had a consequence, and every choice could affect both humans and animals alike. One evening, as they rested beside a small campfire, John felt a change in their relationship. They had spent so much time together, sharing challenges, successes, and quiet moments, that a deep trust had grown between them. He realized that he was no longer just a student, and she was no longer just a guide. They were companions, sharing life in a place that demanded teamwork, patience, and mutual respect. Their bond had grown naturally, shaped by the trials and wonders of the forest. Eliza began teaching John how to make more advanced tools from the resources around them. She showed him how to craft fishing lines from vines, sharpen sticks for traps, and create containers from bark. John struggled at first, but with her guidance, he slowly learned. Every small tool he made was a victory, a step closer to independence. He realized that the forest had much to teach, and that knowledge and skill were as important as courage and strength. As the sun rose each day, John observed how Eliza moved through the forest. She was patient but decisive, quiet but commanding. He admired her independence and her deep understanding of the land. He began to think about her life before he arrived, how she had survived alone, learned from the wilderness, and grown into someone extraordinary. His admiration turned into respect, and a quiet fondness began to grow. It was a connection built not on words, but on shared experience, trust, and mutual reliance. One morning, they faced a challenge that tested both their skills and their bond. A storm had rolled in during the night, leaving the forest damp and treacherous. Trees were heavy with rain, and the ground was slippery. Eliza led John through the wet paths, showing him where to step safely and how to navigate fallen branches. The storm made every movement more difficult, but they managed together. John realized that challenges like this were part of life in the forest. He learned not just survival skills, but resilience, patience, and the importance of staying calm under pressure. After the storm passed, the forest seemed renewed. The air was fresh, the streams full, and the leaves shining with droplets of water. John and Eliza took a moment to rest, watching the sunlight filter through the trees. John felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons, for the challenges, and for Eliza, who had shown him how to navigate this new world. He began to understand that the forest was not just a place of survival, but a place of growth, learning, and connection. As the days passed, John's confidence continued to grow. He was learning not only to survive, but to thrive. He could find food, build shelter, and navigate the terrain with growing skill. He understood the patterns of the forest, the signs of weather, and the behavior of animals. More importantly, he had learned to trust himself, to observe, and to act with care and thought. Eliza watched his progress with quiet satisfaction, proud of the man he was becoming. One evening, as they sat by the fire, John spoke for the first time about his feelings. "Eliza," he said softly, "I never imagined the forest could teach me so much. And I never imagined I would meet someone like you. I am grateful for everything you have shown me." Eliza looked at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. She did not speak immediately. Instead, she reached out and placed her hand lightly on his arm, a small gesture of connection and trust. John understood. Words were not always needed. Their bond had grown through action, patience, and shared experience. In the following days, their life in the forest became more routine, but no less exciting. Each day brought new lessons, new discoveries, and new challenges. John continued to learn from Eliza, but he also began to notice his own strengths. He could build, hunt, gather, and navigate. He had grown from a city man into someone capable of living in the wild. The forest had transformed him, shaping his body, mind, and heart. By now, John felt a deep respect not only for Eliza, but for the forest itself. Every tree, every stream, every animal had something to teach. He realized that life in the wilderness was not just about survival. It was about understanding, observing, and being part of a larger world. He had discovered patience, resilience, and a quiet joy in simple achievements. As night fell one evening, John and Eliza sat by the fire, listening to the forest around them. The air was cool, and the stars twinkled above. John reflected on how far he had come. He had entered the forest alone, inexperienced, and unsure. Now, he was capable, confident, and connected to the world around him. Eliza had been his guide, his teacher, and his companion. Through her guidance, he had discovered not only how to survive, but how to live fully, with respect, courage, and gratitude. He looked at her and smiled quietly. She returned the smile, a small, knowing expression. They had faced challenges together, shared lessons, and grown in trust and respect. The forest had claimed them both, shaping their lives in ways neither had expected. John felt a deep sense of peace. He knew the journey was far from over, but he also knew that with Eliza by his side, he could face whatever lay ahead. Weeks had passed since John had first entered the forest, and he had changed in ways he could hardly have imagined. The city man who had once relied on schedules, walls, and streets was now someone who moved with confidence among the trees, streams, and wildlife. Every day had been a lesson, and every night a moment of reflection. Yet, even with all the skills he had learned, he knew that the forest still had more to teach him. Life here was unpredictable, and every day required attention, patience, and respect. Eliza had remained by his side throughout, guiding him, teaching him, and quietly observing his growth. John had come to admire her more than ever. She was strong, independent, and fearless. Yet she had a deep understanding of the forest and a remarkable gentleness when it came to teaching. He realized that he had grown not only in skill but also in character. The forest had shaped him, and Eliza had shaped him, too, through trust, patience, and guidance. One bright morning, as the sun rose through the misty trees, Eliza led John to a hill that overlooked a wide valley. The view was breathtaking. Rivers twisted through the green land, birds flew gracefully above, and the forest stretched endlessly into the horizon. "This," Eliza said softly, "is the heart of the land. It belongs to no one, yet it gives life to everyone who respects it." John looked out at the vast expanse and felt a deep sense of awe. He realized how small he was in comparison, yet how important it was to live carefully, to honor the world around him. As they rested on the hilltop, Eliza spoke about the life she had built here. She told John about the challenges she had faced alone, the harsh winters, the scarcity of food, and the moments of fear. But she also spoke about the joys, the clear streams, the quiet nights under the stars, the lessons learned from every tree and animal. John listened, captivated. He understood now that survival was more than physical, it was mental, emotional, and spiritual. The forest demanded courage, but it also offered wisdom, strength, and peace. After their break, Eliza suggested that they explore a new part of the forest, a place she had never brought anyone before. John felt a thrill of excitement. The journey was difficult, involving steep slopes, thick undergrowth, and winding paths, but together they navigated it carefully. Along the way, Eliza taught John more advanced skills: how to recognize hidden water sources, how to find medicinal plants, and how to observe animal behavior without disturbing it. John absorbed everything eagerly. He had learned so much already, yet every new lesson reminded him that the forest was vast and full of mysteries. During their exploration, John and Eliza came across signs of other people in the forest, old campsites, footprints, and remnants of tools. Eliza explained that humans had always lived here, long before the city had existed. She showed him how to read these signs and understand what they meant. John felt a connection not only to Eliza but to all the people who had learned to survive in this place. He realized that the forest was not just a setting, it was a story, full of lessons passed down through generations. As evening approached, they set up camp near a quiet stream. John prepared the fire, while Eliza gathered wood and arranged their shelter. The air was cool, the water sparkling, and the forest alive with evening sounds. They sat together, enjoying a simple meal. John felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had entered the forest alone, inexperienced, and uncertain. Now, he was capable, confident, and connected to the world around him. The lessons, the challenges, and Eliza's guidance had transformed him completely. That night, under a sky filled with countless stars, John realized something he had not expected. It was not just his survival that had changed. His heart had changed too. He felt a bond with Eliza that went beyond friendship or companionship. It was a connection forged in trust, shared experience, and the quiet rhythms of life in the forest. He looked at her, sitting calmly by the fire, and knew that their journey together had shaped them both in profound ways. Over the next days, John and Eliza continued their life in the forest with growing confidence. They faced challenges together: storms, scarcity of food, and tricky terrain, but each challenge strengthened their bond. John had become skilled enough to handle most tasks on his own, yet he never stopped learning from Eliza. She remained a teacher, a guide, and a friend, helping him see not only the practical aspects of survival, but also the beauty and harmony of life in the wilderness. One morning, After a heavy rainfall, they discovered a small waterfall hidden in a dense grove. The water fell with a soft roar into a crystal-clear pool below. John felt a rush of excitement and joy. Eliza smiled, pleased to see his wonder. "Places like this remind us why we endure the hardships," she said. John agreed. The forest was full of treasures like this, moments of beauty and peace that made every struggle worthwhile. It was a world of learning, growth, and connection. As the sun set over the forest, John reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the first night when he had slept under the stars, vulnerable and unprepared. That morning had been the beginning of everything: the meeting with Eliza, the lessons, the adventures, and the transformation. He realized that the forest had given him more than survival skills. It had given him courage, wisdom, and a deep appreciation for life. And Eliza had given him guidance, trust, and companionship, helping him grow in ways he could never have imagined. Eventually, John understood that life in the forest was about more than just surviving. It was about living fully, learning constantly, and connecting with the world around you. The forest had claimed him in a way, but it had also offered him freedom, understanding, and a sense of belonging. Eliza had shown him that the wild was not something to fear, but something to respect and embrace. Through her guidance, he had discovered his own strength, courage, and resilience. One clear night, as they sat by the fire, John looked at Eliza and said softly, "I cannot imagine going back to the city now. I have learned more here in weeks than I ever did in years before." Eliza nodded, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "The forest changes everyone who learns from it," she said, "and it changes those who are willing to listen, watch, and grow." John smiled, realizing that he had truly changed, not just in skill, but in heart and mind. In the following days, they explored further, learned more, and shared quiet moments of companionship. Their lives had become intertwined with the forest, with each other, and with the rhythm of life around them. John had grown into someone capable, independent, and deeply aware of the world. Eliza had found a companion who trusted her guidance, respected her knowledge, and shared her life in the wilderness. Together, they had discovered not just survival, but a deeper understanding of life, connection, and respect for the world around them. Finally, as the days turned into weeks, and the seasons began to change, John realized that he had found something rare and precious. The forest had claimed him, yes, but it had also given him a life full of learning, courage, and wonder. And Eliza, the wild girl who had first appeared when he was sleeping under the stars, had become not just a teacher, but a true companion. Their bond was unspoken but strong, built on trust, experience, and shared growth. John knew that his life had been transformed forever. He had entered the forest alone, uncertain and inexperienced. He had emerged stronger, wiser, and connected to a world he had never known. The wilderness had taught him lessons no city could offer, and Eliza had shown him how to listen, learn, and live fully. Together, they had found a life that was raw, beautiful, and real, a life in harmony with the land and with each other. As they sat together one last evening before moving to a new part of the forest, John looked at the stars above and felt a deep sense of peace. He had been claimed by the forest, guided by a remarkable companion, and transformed in ways he could never have imagined. The journey had been challenging, exciting, and full of lessons. But it had also been a journey of connection, growth, and discovery. And as he sat beside Eliza, he knew that this was only the beginning of a life lived fully, in harmony with the wild, with courage, and with gratitude.